On behalf of the Jasper Chamber and VUJC, I'd like to welcome everyone here this morning, and I want to thank our legislators. They're just getting settled, so we'll give them a chance to sit down and get things in order. And now I would like to introduce Christian Bloom. He's the dean here at the university, and he'd like to say a few words.
Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to echo Nancy's welcome, not only to our campus, but to the Center for Technology, Innovation, and Manufacturing. I really enjoyed the session that we had a couple months ago, and I hope that you all enjoy yourselves today. Thank you for coming.
All right, I think we'll get started this morning. We have with us this morning our state representative, Steve Bartels, and Shane Lindauer, and our state senator, Mark Messmer. And we usually let them tell you a few things about what's going on in the legislative session. I think Mark said they have about a week and a half yet to go, so I'm sure that'll be a busy week and a half. And then, but we will not be holding any more of these. This will be the last one that we'll hold for the year. So you want to get started, and they turn your microphone on. Just hold the mute button and that will turn it on.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. A couple things that's been going on. Had several bills that are still kind of moving. Of course, the contract appraisal bill, which actually just helps Indiana Houchin appraisers. There's been some issues with outside management companies not paying them and not providing them contracts, so that's moving forward in the Senate. A lot of talk about the purple paint law, which has been helping to help farmers and landowners mark their territory. As of right now, it's in Rules Committee, which, if you don't know anything about Rules Committee, is kind of a boneyard for things, if you know about politics. And what it's looking like is we're trying to find it, put it somewhere in another bill that makes sense and get that passed. It's really to help from liability and theft and not just a hunting issue. Child safety alerts. I don't know if you're aware, but obviously there's an amber and a silver alert everybody's heard of. If there is a child with disabilities or is an endangered child, if they become missing or displaced, they actually do not fit into those categories. So I co-authored legislation that puts them in the category that can be part of one of those alerts. The Health Matters bill is really from personal experience, is an issue with law enforcement officers. It puts law enforcement in the same list of firefighters and medical personnel to be able to get tested and notified if they've been exposed to bodily fluids or blood. In the past, they had been exempt or weren't part of that list, so now they can be part of that notification and request to be tested. Drug addiction workforce, which co-authored. One of the things that I've seen as a police officer and as an employer is you've got somebody that's obviously on drugs, and you hire them, and they don't pass the drug screen. This gives the employer the ability to say, I will still employ you, gives them that one opportunity, and they can go through a program. And so it gives the employers the ability to do that and give these people an extra chance. And that goes for either pre-screening or actually once they just get hired. So a couple other bills that I'm looking at for this next year. Obviously, you've seen in the paper a lot of times foster care and adoption issues are a big issue for me. I can't quite understand how people can actually go to a foreign country, adopt a child, and come back here and have it be cheaper and easier than our own country. So we're really looking at how Indiana can change those procedures and make it easier to get those children the need and the families that they deserve. One of the things that was interesting in talking to a lot of these people, foster care providers and committees, is that a comment was brought up, and we kicked it around, that if every church in the state of Indiana took care of one foster kid, we probably would not have a problem. It's an interesting concept. I don't know if the numbers work out or not, but I would like to push that onto to local churches and throughout the state and say, hey, maybe this is something we could actually do. There's a couple other bills I'm working on for law enforcement officers. One of the other things, there's a bill with two other representatives on education. I'm trying to work that out as far how to benefit teachers and add some extra benefits to students. So that's kind of what's been going on in the House for me.
Excuse me, yeah. So thank you again for being here. I know there are other things that you folks would probably like to be doing this morning, so I just appreciate you taking time and being here. And
Don't sell yourself short.
hearing me anyway, probably, right? These two gentlemen, I'm sure you're ecstatic to see. So, but again, thank you for being here and just being involved and engaged. It really is important, in our form of government that we have people who are civic-minded and who are engaged and who educate themselves no matter what you may believe. So I just appreciate you being here. I've said, last time, again, and I'll kind of reiterate for maybe those of you who weren't here, just kind of what an honor and a privilege it is to be representing the people of District 63 and just being a part of this process. It really is, Steve and I, we said last time, and we still talk regularly, when we head to the Capitol and just seeing the building there, it's very humbling. And so I appreciate this opportunity. So as far as specific bills, the only bill that I initially authored was had a large fiscal impact this session. It was a veterans bill. Being a non-budget year and a large fiscal impact, it didn't make it very far, unfortunately. So that was part of my learning curve going forward this session. There were several bills that I was able to co-author and co-sponsor, including one Senator Messmer will talk about here, I'm sure, regarding DCS and children that are eligible for those programs. But specifically, more recently, since last time I was here, there's a House Bill 1292, which is kind of the natural resources, the DNR bill. It was really just kind of a cleanup of some things that happened last year, inadvertently through some language. It made it illegal to hunt using rifles on public lands. So there's some cleanup on that, some cleanup of lighting issues for boats on public waters and just where you're allowed to fish and things like that. So a lot of details, just a lot of broad issues in there since the last time. I mentioned last time surprisingly to me, when I went up there, I was put on Roads and Transportation Committee, which, to be quite honest, isn't one that I probably would have picked had I had the opportunity, but it's been probably the most enjoyable just from the standpoint of what we've been exposed to, what I've been able to learn through automated vehicles. And again, I think I said this last time as well, we may think in Southern Indiana that that's not really affecting us or going to affect us anytime soon, but I think we may be surprised at how soon that could be coming to the state and Southern Indiana. And so one of the bills we worked on, I think it was 1341, that I was able to co-sponsor, basically put in place a framework for just rules, what people can do. So, can some guys in a garage go out and put some servos in a car and call it AV and just go out onto the road? That's conceivably possible these days. And there's really no framework. The federal government has not put any kind of framework thus far in place governing that kind of stuff. So states, I think there's 20-some states who have kind of taken this on themselves and started implementing a framework, some guidelines for what can and can't happen on our roads. This really comes into play in construction zones, school zones, church zones, through neighborhoods, that kind of thing. The technology really is there, but legislation is kind of the holdup on some of that stuff. So several other things that we've been able to co-sponsor just as a House and the Senate. There's several bills here. I have a list as far as DCS and protecting, and again, Senator Messmer's got one that he authored that I was co-sponsor on, just allowing us at the state level to further protect children. I'm sure most of us have heard about the DCS issue, the problems we've had there, and the current state of affairs, and going forward, what can we do? So there's several of those things that are in the list. I'd be happy to speak with you about those at any point. So I just thank you again for the opportunity to be here. Looking forward to engaging with you all. So thank you.
Okay, sit down. Here we go. Okay. Well, thank you all for showing up again this morning. Beautiful day. You probably, like I said, there are probably other things you'd rather be doing. I did have pretty good success on the the bills that I started for the session. I had 7 of the 10 issues that I started that looks like they're going to drag across the finish line, and a couple more that I picked up from the House that I didn't know were coming. But my short-term rental bill, I had Senate Bill 382 that started the session. My roommate in the House, he started House Bill 1035, which was the same bill. We both filed it to see whose committee would start moving the bill first, and his got traction going faster than mine, so it just cleared a spot in my committee to hear other issues. And that one has passed the House and the Senate. It's been concurred upon by Representative Lehman, and I think we're going to have a bill signing ceremony with the governor this week, so that's kind of cool. The small cells issue dealing with the deployment of 5G small cell technology, I had Senate Bill 258. Representative Ober had House Bill 1050. Worked with him extensively through the first half of session. Got his bill in a point that the local government officials, the utility folks, the electric utilities, cellular companies, everybody was on board and comfortable with that bill. And so we went ahead and moved that issue during the first half, and we've passed it through the Senate on the second half. The update to the chiropractor code, I had Senate Bill 160, Representative Beimer had Senate Bill 1384. Worked on that extensively through the months of January, and even February up to my committee hearing time, to work with the MDs, the osteopaths, the physical therapists, the occupational therapists, to get that bill. So, because there's always potential overlap, for what one group does, and when you change, we did a complete rewrite of their code, and took it from, chiropractors can't, just basic a list of what they can't do, to a list of what they can do, and then trying to prevent, unintended overlap between, all the other medical professions, and it was work. But finally, my committee schedule that I was going to hear that on was the last committee day for me, and I had told the chiropractors and the MDs and the osteopaths and everybody, we need to sit down and get one final, hammering out of what your concerns are, so we can get this bill moved. And I didn't want to try to move it and have people, all up in the air on concerns that we've, not listened to them. So we got that done, got that bill passed through committee unanimously, passed on the floor 48-0 last week, and back over to Representative Beimer. Hopefully he can concur and you guys get one more shot at it. But to get all those groups, neutral on the bill, and all of them proactively working to get that thing in a good spot was pretty rewarding. My Senate Bill 164, trying to give the body shop some protection on dealing with insurance companies, passed through the Senate, passed through the House, but they put some language in there in the House Insurance Committee that I think really clouded up the bill on, I think it was an attempt to try to give body shop owners some liability protection, but it didn't really end up written in a good way. So I'm going to dissent on that bill and probably try to clean that language up in conference committee. Right now the trial lawyers are up in arms on it, and even the body shop owners didn't really like the way it ended up. I mean, it probably worked out well for the insurance companies, but I'm not so sure it worked out well for everybody else. So we'll work on that one and clean it up, hopefully. One that I had sent over to Representative Bartels, Senate Bill 380, and that issue came from Denny Spinner when they were dealing with their community crossings, or not, theirs was Stellar Cities, but community crossings, it'll be the same issue. When you've got street work in a historic preservation zone, and it's all state funded, which we clarified, which that in the section of code we pulled it from would only be state funded, but there was some confusing language in it, and NDOT wanted us to clarify that it's only when there's all state dollars, because if there's federal and state money appropriated to do the work, there's a federal historic preservation review process that's only a 30-day process. But when it's all state funds, the committee, the board that approved those only meets quarterly if they meet, because if they don't have a quorum, they can't meet. So I worked with DNR and got language written to where they agreed to a 30-day review process, just like the feds when it's all state dollars. That's passed. Did you guys get it passed last week? Yep. And I think I'm going to, they did have just a slight tweak that I'll concur. We'll vote it through next week probably in the Senate and send that on down to the governor. Senate Bill 381 was the DCS, given, and that this came from the local CASA folks on if a child is a sex abuse victim, all of the kids in that family are automatically designated as a child in need of service, because if there's abuse with one kid, there's probably abuse with all the kids, or potentially. And Kathy brought this to me back in October, said, if there's physical abuse, if one kid gets a broken arm from, abuse from a parent, and the levels of battery and, strangulation, attempted suicide, or attempted assisted suicide, I mean, the things that we pointed out were pretty high, high offenses. If a kid is a subject of one of these abuses, why aren't the rest of the kids watched automatically? And everybody just assumed, well, they are, but they weren't. So I worked with Wendy McNamara. She's on the DCS Oversight Board for the legislature, and she ran the language through the juvenile court judges, through that oversight board, through DCS, and really got it into a pretty good spot to where if a kid is a victim of violent behavior by a parent, all the kids are automatically CHINS designations. That bill passed through the Senate 47-0, passed through the House 93-0, and is off to the governor for signature. And really glad to get that one done. And then I had another Senate Bill 424 that would have been a ban on local ordinances mandating sprinklers in your homes. And there's not been any city or town, that's started that yet. That was an issue the governor wanted taken care of. And we assumed that the State Building Commission had the ability to disprove an ordinance that, they didn't think was in the best interest of the public, but they were challenged on some other rulings they made like that last summer and fall. And when it went to court, if the State Building Commission is not given the authority to block an ordinance, if it's silent in the law, we found out they don't have the ability to block them. So there's been states across the country where just city by city, there's been ordinances, passed that require sprinklers in homes. And it's not just the installation cost of the sprinklers. A lot of times if you don't have adequate pressure, you have to put in, pump boosting systems to raise the pressure. There's ongoing maintenance. It's a huge cost impact on residential construction. So that one got rolled into Senate Bill 393, which passed, I believe, in the House and is coming back to us. And I think that one was like 80 or 90 something and there was a couple no votes, but so appreciate working with the House members on that, and getting that issue rolled in. And probably all of us have heard, in the news, and I guess I've got my handout that covers this, but with the recent gun violence in Florida, the hot news topic of the day is, what are you doing to prevent, gun violence in schools? Are you guys passing any new laws? That's been obviously I've seen it, you've seen it on social media, emails, but just an update to what we have done in Indiana that has made a huge difference. And we are going to we've got a resolution that we're going to send the additional study of that during the interim study committees on school safety, to do another just overall comprehensive review of what else we can do. But in the wake of the shooting in Florida, we just went through a review of what Indiana has already done. And in 2013, we passed Senate Bill 1, and that set up a secured school grant fund that annually distributes schools grants to school corporations, charter schools, and non-publics for school safety. And we've got $9 million a year going into that grant fund, $18 million in the current biennial budget, and the schools can use that to purchase school safety equipment and technology. They can use that to pay a school resource officer, and they can use that to conduct threat assessments of their property. Since 2013, over 300 school districts have received about $39 million in secured school grants from the state. Indiana is one of only 5 states that has a red flag law. And if you say, well, what the heck's that? Well, that allows law enforcement officers to confiscate firearms of dangerous individuals. The thorough process would be to get a court order first, and that can come from a complaint from a family member or friend of somebody, like in Florida, when they called the FBI and red flagged this guy twice and nothing happened. Well, if you indicate to law enforcement that you know somebody who's a threat to themselves or other people, they can get a court order to seize those persons, firearms. If a person's an imminent risk to themselves or other people, if a person has mental illness that may be controlled by medication, but that person has a history of not consistently taking that medication, and then that person is a risk of personal injury to themselves or others in the future, if there's documented evidence that would give rise to believe that a person has a propensity for violence or emotionally unstable conduct, and that person could be a risk of people in the present or in the future. In any of those situations, you can get a court order to seize their firearms. If a law enforcement officer seizes a person's firearms without the prior warrant, they can. They've got to go to court then to show that there was probable cause for that seizure. That you can do that process in reverse. And if a probable cause is not found, the firearms would be returned. There's also procedures to ensure that law enforcement can't use that power wrongly. As soon as possible after notice of a seizure is given to a court, court must hold a hearing to determine if it was justified, as I said earlier. The burden of proof is on the state, that they have to prove clear and convincing evidence that that person is dangerous. If the state meets that burden, the law enforcement officials maintain those, possession of those firearms. Every 6 months, a person can come back and repetition for having them returned, and the court, has to determine if that danger has subsided. After 5 years, if the law enforcement is still in possession of them, they can dispose of the firearms. A person can give written notice that the law enforcement officials sell their firearms and give them the cash if they're not going to be turned back over. We are one of only 2 states that require every school district to employ a certified school safety specialist. And the Indiana Department of Education provides annual training to these safety specialists to make sure they are adequately prepared to do their job. And finally, the Indiana State Police provides free active shooter training scenarios to every school corporation or business in the state that wants it for free. To date, 45,000 Hoosiers have been trained by the Indiana State Police on active shooter training drills. So we are not doing nothing. We've done quite a bit, and we're willing to look at if things we could do better, we will. I believe just this past week, USA Today had analyzed some safety upgrades that Senator Leising had a school in her district that spent about $400,000, some through these grants, some through some other grants, and some just from their capital funds, to put school safety procedures in their building. And it includes remote cameras that are linked to the local sheriff's department, complete lockdown systems, smoke systems that they can block a shooter's ability to see what's going on and run freely through the building. And they got awarded as the #1 school safety school district in the country, and that's a pretty good recognition for our state and for them. But they were located far enough away from law enforcement that they felt like it's what they needed to do, because response times would have been long enough that they thought they needed to take those extra steps and have done so. So that's all I've got for now. We'll turn it over to questions, or if you guys got anything else.
All right, sounds like you have a All right. We will open it up now for questions and answers. Does anyone have anything they would like to ask? All right. Okay. All right.
Okay. My name's Dave, and Mark, I always appreciate our coffee sessions at McDonald's discussing things. I have 2 things, but I'll go with the most important. I've noticed in the last year or so that Jasper has actively been giving a whole bunch of tax abatements to new businesses. And these are businesses that are extremely profitable. They're businesses that have deep pockets and a lot of money, but yet they come up to the city or the county and ask for, oh, we don't want to pay any income taxes. We'll bring people into work. And then usually a week later, you see a report from the city council or the commission saying, oh, we can't hire a new policeman, or we can't do this project, and we can't do that project because we don't have enough tax money. And it seems like there's a conflict of interest going on. I love seeing businesses grow in town. I love seeing expansion. That's really good for everybody. But why are they getting so many tax abatements that they can't beat their budget? And they're saying, well, I think the individual homeowner or the individual people in the community should subsidize this company's expansion because we gave them a tax break, even though they have a huge profit, even though they're very successful. But now, citizens, we need to tax you more because we gave, I won't name a company in town or several, a tax break. You're going to pick up the burden of supporting the city. What can the state do to balance that out?
Well, the current abatement rules basically, allow local communities, either at the city level or the county level, to establish their own criteria for abatements. We kind of set up some framework. It says if you're going to offer abatements, there's got to be, I think there's a preset, criteria, but you can have flexibility to develop the abatement program as you want based on, jobs creation, the pay rate of those jobs, reuse of existing infrastructure, and I think there's one more criteria element, but we pretty much let them craft their 1 to 10 year abatement schedules as they want, as long as it's got the, some economic development criteria in it. They can weight those factors however they want, or they can just use a straight up 3-year, 5-year, or 10-year, abatement, with either, and staggered and then just, equally, per year. But we don't really tell them, what they have to, we don't want to control what you abate and what you don't abate. And some communities do no abatements, and some probably do, abatements on everything. But I did see in the paper that I believe Jasper was looking at updating their criteria, for abatements, and probably does need review, and if they were a little too generous with them. But that's only abating the new development. It doesn't abate anything that's existing. Any existing tax base doesn't go down from an abatement. You're only abating the phasing in of the new development. So you're never losing money, from your current budget off of an abatement. It's always staggering in the growth of the new base into that tax base.
Do I get a follow-up comment then?
Well, and myself and there's other 2 Jasper City Council members here this morning. I'm sure we'd love to have a conversation with you about that. And the tax abatement procedures for the city was just changed and tweaked, and some of those numbers, you have to have more investment than you had before, and some of those things have changed. So we would probably love to have a conversation with you about that and explain it in more depth. Did you want to make another comment?
Well, I wanted to say that if the state sets the broader lines and says city can do it, could the state build in a thing that city and county, if you decide to abate this company's taxes for 10 years, you cannot raise the property tax or the citizen tax load?
Okay, we'll move on to another question now. Or Shane, did you want to comment? Okay.
I mean, I would just say that, this is a constant struggle between state and local government. And I think generally, I know Representative Bartels and I think Senator Messmer, don't want to speak for them certainly, but whenever possible, we try to leave local control at local control, because they're going to be more you're going to see Nancy, and it's going to be a lot more responsive at the local level, I think, whenever possible. It's, the wheels turn slowly at the State House, and when you start implementing one-size-fits-all controls for the entire state, I think there's always kind of the law of unintended consequences. So my perspective is is to leave local control whenever possible. So,
All right, and any other questions? No, it's a quiet group this morning. Wait, there's one back here. Did someone back here have their hand up? Carl.
I'll talk to Yeah, Carla Striegel-Winter with the Du Bois County Solid Waste District, and I was here last time thanking Senator Messmer for his past support of the solid waste districts, and that we seemed to have a session where the solid waste districts weren't being attacked, and so some stuff has come up recently, as you guys may know, some changes possibly in the way solid waste districts are funded, and I thought it was interesting that what Shane just said about, keeping it local to the local people, and that's how the solid waste districts are set up. So I would like to ask that you guys do consider that when you see things come up like this that would change things for the entire state when maybe one community is having an issue. So that's all I wanted to say.
Well, and I did get an email from Carla that there was an amendment going to be, that got blocked in committee, that would have limited the ability for how solid waste districts, get paid. It got blocked in committee. Then that Senator Brown was going to offer that amendment on the floor, and I went to our Senate attorneys to make sure that amendment got ruled non-germane, and because it was trying to go into a regional sewer district bill and then trying to amend, something in that would have blocked funding for solid waste districts, and our attorney said it is non-germane and she can't offer on the floor, so.
And the language is still in a Senate bill, maybe 274?
No, her language on the funding got blocked. The only thing she got rolled in was something to do if you shut down a solid waste district, some processes on closing it down. But I mean, nothing to do, how you disband the board after it's been.
Okay.
Yeah, but her language on the funding blocking got killed.
Yeah, okay. And, that would not affect the way that the solid waste district in Du Bois County is funded right now, but, we hate to see stuff come through that might be directed to a certain community that would change, the options for the solid waste districts throughout the state,
Yeah.
so.
Appreciate that, and always give me a heads up when you see something like that cooking.
Okay, we have a question in the back.
May not need the mic, I'm not sure if it's in the back.
You have to talk louder.
Hi, I'm Steve Ubler, and I represent the pro-life community of Du Bois County. And I've been asked to come today and thank you three and Erin Houchin for all the pro-life bills you passed in the last 3 or 4 years. You made Indiana probably the standard bearer of the pro-life community throughout the United States. You guys are primarily responsible for it here in southern Indiana. There's a couple bills that you passed this year that we went through. Erin initiated one thing to stop chemicals, home abortion drugs, to keep that out of the state. There's one thing that does concern us, and that is the Howard Institution of Indiana University is still buying baby parts from aborted babies coming out of Los Angeles through the University of Washington to experiment on. And we would like for you guys to possibly consider that next year, or to back the pro-life community in trying to stop this type of action throughout our state. I think it's a blot on our state, and especially for such a horrific act as late-term abortions that are being done out in California, and the parts are being sent here to Indiana. But anyway, thank you guys for everything you've done for us, okay?
All right. Chad?
Hi, I'm Chad Blessinger. I'm one of the Du Bois County Commissioners. And one of the things that I've been considering recently has been jail funding. There are many counties across the state that are been getting letters from the DOC saying your current structure isn't standard or isn't to current standards. One of the funding mechanisms that some counties are looking at is an increase in their local income tax. the way it is set up currently, if Du Bois County wanted to put an addition to their local income tax let's just say it's 0.25%. Of that 0.25%, that gets chopped. It wouldn't go just to the jail project if that's what the project in need is. The cities would get a portion of that, and other entities would get a portion of it. So in turn, what you would have to do is raise the tax a lot higher than is necessary for your project just to get the ample funding, as some of that funding would be divvied up. So as you consider this next year, next session, I know there's going to be a lot of counties coming up. I think there's a mechanism where a special exemption or a special use tax, we can come kiss the ring of the legislature and they will give it to certain people. Last year, a county asked for that and they were denied. I believe it was maybe Fulton County. I'm not sure who it was. But just as you move forward, I would hope that that's something that is considered, so that if indeed there is a income tax that needs to be raised from a local community, if that's what they decide on, it would be nice if we could do it project specific, so that we don't have to raise people's taxes more than what it takes to get a facility built to come up to the department standards. I know that Du Bois County isn't the only place looking at this, and from what I've heard, the cost per bed when you build a new one of these jails is $80,000 to $100,000 per bed. So if you build a 200-bed facility, you can see that adds up pretty quick, and that's going to cost the taxpayers. We want to keep that to a minimum. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a little bit of disagreement here. We're not sure. There was an amendment to a bill in the House just this week where a representative was trying to add an amendment to do exactly what you're talking about. It had a cap on the percent, or the 10th of a percent, somewhere in there. I think it was 0.2% or something, if I remember, that you could, and it was project specific. I'll have to get with you, Chad, and let you know exactly where that's at. I thought that we did amend that in. Now it's still got to go, it's still got a ways to go before that would become, an option for you at this point. But there is talk of that if it hasn't been amended in already. So
I haven't seen that, but typically something like that, and there's special use taxation authority given. We enable you to do it, and then the commissioners or council would still have to act on following through. So it's not unusual every session for somebody to have a special use tax created for something where we enable that community to then adopt it, and if we need to look at that going forward, I'm sure that's going to be a pretty consistent request, for jail capacity anyway.
Steve, did you want to comment on anything?
I was actually going to try and look up the amendment so we could actually give an answer right now, so I'll just have to get back to you, Chad. But
There's a question in the back.
My name is John King, and there's been a lot of hype in the media, I guess, about these driverless cars that are delivering this and that. And I was wondering if you have proactively thought about creating a law which would prevent these driverless vehicles from operating within our state. My second question is regarding people who, for political reasons, block traffic and block roads, putting people at great convenience and risk. These are usually Soros-funded groups like By Any Means Necessary, Black Lives Matter, and Antifa. I was wondering what you have done to stop people from illegally blocking traffic and putting the public at risk and people's lives and just inconveniencing people. Is it possible to change the law on false imprisonment to allow individuals to sue these people in court for false imprisonment? Thank you.
Okay. Regarding your first question, that's something that I referenced initially. If your question is putting legislation in place that would eliminate the possibility of having automated vehicles, is there legislation, or would, I propose, or any of these other guys, again, I don't want to speak for them, but I would not be in favor of that type of legislation. We did put constraints on where these vehicles can operate. With automated vehicles, there's like 6 different levels, all the way down from no automation up to, you get to cruise control, on up to like a level 3, which is what we would probably consider a actual level of an automated vehicle, and where the driver's still got to be there, still got to be engaged, but can somewhat disengage, but they still got to be in the driver's seat. That type of vehicle is really not that far off. So that level 3, when you get up into 4 and 5, that's where the driver doesn't necessarily even have to be in the driver's seat. You could be sitting in the back, reading the paper or something like that potentially. So those are the kind of things we're looking at putting in a framework to govern where those things can operate, under what conditions. I mean, if it's raining, that's going to change conditions. If it's snowing, certainly that's going to change conditions. So there is a framework put in place that we passed this year. I'm thinking, Senator Messmer can.
I think it's on the second reading Monday in the Senate.
Yeah. So that kind of stuff's in place. As far as eliminating it, I think that elimination or precluding the possibility of automated vehicles is certainly not where I would want to go. I have my. I like to drive, right? I don't know that I would want to be one of those guys sitting in the back, being toted around. I don't know that that's me, but I think that's coming whether we like it or not. Unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, I guess. So I think that, that's coming. So, regarding your first question, I would not be in favor of any kind of legislation precluding it. I'll let Representative Bartels has law enforcement experience, so I'll let him answer the second.
And it's John, right? So the first question is, same as Shane. It's going to be part of our transition from transportation. I think the state has an obligation to make sure that we protect the citizens. So that legislation that gives it parameters is what we're here to do. Your second question, there's already a law impeding the vehicular flow of traffic. The real question is, as a law enforcement officer, when you have 100 people on the road, what do 2 or 3 of us really need to do? Could we arrest people doing that? Absolutely. There's already a law there. The intent is to diffuse the situation based on emotions, and so being either leaving it as an infraction or escalating to a misdemeanor is more of an officer's discretion. And it's really one of those things that you see on TV a lot of times, and you're like, 5 officers are not going to get 100 people out of the road. So there's already a law. I think most law enforcement officers are trying to defuse the situation, not trying to arrest and escalate the issue.
Okay.
Hi, thanks for coming today. I appreciate it. I'm Larry Kleeman, and I asked a question at the last session regarding Department of Child Services and children in need of services. I want to follow up on that today. I actually have 2 questions, but it's related to the same subject. The last report that I saw, I believe it was 2016, there were 80 kids that died in the state of Indiana as a result of child abuse. That was up 50% from the previous year, 60 kids, which was up 50% from the previous year, 40 kids. I don't know what the current statistics are, but 80 kids died in Indiana as a result of child abuse. I don't want to diminish what happened in Florida, but that's 5 times the number of kids that were killed in Florida. So my first question is, what is the General Assembly doing to reduce child abuse, and specifically deaths as a result of child abuse? My second question is, we all know, at least I know, the child welfare system is in a crisis in Indiana. The director resigned a few months ago. The governor hired a consultant from Alabama to study the situation. That interim report, I think, has just been released. There was an article in the Evansville paper that cited a number of different factors from their initial interim report. The final report is due, I believe, in June. My question to you is, when the final report comes in, will the General Assembly meet this summer to take action on the child welfare system? Thank you.
Well, I can answer that pretty quickly. The answer would be no. We're going to have a study committee that's going to take that report and then look at reviewing that with DCS and looking at what additional changes we need to make to the DCS process. What's the General Assembly doing to prevent child abuse deaths? I just authored a bill that was passed unanimously to help get kids CHIN's designation when there's abusive situations happening in that family. We do stuff to address DCS problems every year. So,
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, there are, I've got kind of a cheat sheet here too. There are 10 bills authored that, kind of would fall into the classification of protecting children. So that's just on the Senate side. I could go back and probably do a count on the House side as well. So certainly it's not an issue that's gone unnoticed in the General Assembly. Certainly with the bills that are there. Again, Senator Messmer's been author of one of those, and so I think that, in the past, the option or the solution has been to throw money at it, and obviously it needs money. But I think our approach has been, at this point, to let the professionals do what professionals are doing in this situation and make a determination after that. But the idea that nothing is being done, I think, is certainly not true. So.
and in last year's budget, we appropriated another $450 million to DCS to hire more caseworkers, to hire more boots on the ground, to work with all of the social programs that they administer through FSSA to try to help identify and fix addiction problems within families that are causing a lot of the abusive situations. So there's a lot of attention being addressed to it, but I'm glad you're concerned.
Yeah, Larry, it's great questions, and I think question 2 has kind of been answered. And as I stated before, one of my committees is Family, Children, and Human Affairs, so I hear a lot of testimony on both sides of these issues and have throughout the House. Going back to your first question, I think the key here is the same as our drug problem. It's the same as anything else. We have a mental health issue in the United States and in Indiana. I think that once we figure out how to address those issues, we can help combat child abuse, drug addiction. We can help people get employed through the bill I co-sponsored that says, look, you get one more chance. We understand you're doing this. Once people feel worth, they tend to change. So there's been lots of things that are happening in the House and the Senate to combat these issues. I look forward to seeing the outcome of this study and look forward to this next year of working on those issues.
All right. You have a question? Okay.
I think this just applies to what you guys were just talking about. I want to thank you for the school security bill. That sounds like it's something that's going to be beneficial. But just so you all are aware, and you may know all of this, but in the schools there is no money designated for counseling or support. Guidance counselors for career options, yes, but there's no dollars set aside specifically for social workers in the schools to maybe nip those things in the bud. Barney Fife probably had it right, nip it in the bud, right? So, we let these things boil over, and then we've got people who are come out of school with a hatred. Let's not, if we can prevent those things from happening, then we don't need police officers in the schools or guns in the hands of teachers. As a social worker myself, I tried to work with children. I could not afford to. I got offered a job last summer. I wanted to do in-home work with children. I have a master's degree. I thought I could really help. I couldn't afford to take that job because I couldn't pay my insurance. I couldn't pay. It just wasn't the job they offered me, I could not afford to take. So you talked about throwing money at it and there being a lot of funding. I don't know where that money is. Southern Hills Counseling Center, call there, tell them you have problems and ask for an appointment. See how long it takes you to actually talk to a therapist. And those therapists, we can't get experienced you know, if you're in that system at all, I don't know what money you're talking about. I don't know where it went or what happened to it, but as a person who's trying to help people, that's what I've devoted my job, you know, my career to. I can't work in that. I'm a hospice social worker and I love what I do, but you know, it's not in working with children. You can't live on that money. So just offering that. Also, anybody got any insight onto why the governor kind of squished the Old Forest bill from coming to a vote in the Senate? Anybody have any thoughts on his motives there, his concerns? No? Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'll just kind of a follow-up. I mean, obviously you're passionate, you care about children, and I thank you for that, for your heart. I mean, you can really hear your concern there. And I think that is why, I mean, to your point, where does the money go? I think that's why the governor and the leadership has decided to step back and look at this. You know, and so I think that's kind of, you kind of made the point there. It's going somewhere, and you know, maybe more funding is necessary. I'm not disagreeing with you there, but to me, you know, letting these folks do what they're here to do and kind of figure out where the weaknesses are, where the money is going, where it can be better allocated. You know, those are the things that at least that's, you know, me looking at the situation. You know, I'm with you there, so I appreciate it.
All right. I think we're probably to the end of our questions this morning. And we have a little bit of time left, so I would think the legislators would be willing to stick around a little bit and have some private discussions if anybody would like to do that with them. So again, let's go on.
Yes, I just want to caveat a couple quick things that Senator Messmer may not know that we did at the House the last day. One of the things we talked about school safety, and there was an amendment that passed that changed how the fire alarms are in school systems. And I think you probably heard that now. So, you know, some of the issues with the pull fire alarms is one of those mechanisms for creating a large, you get the kids out in the room and you have more potential for casualties in a scenario that's not a fire. So the amendment has passed the House where most of these school corporations have the new fire alarm systems that are electronic, digital. So we did change the legislation to where you can remove those pull alarms throughout the school system as long as they have the newer system. So that's going to help a little bit of school safety. Going back to Dave's question, as a council president at Crawford County, I don't know Jasper's tax abatement, but I do know that we looked at Du Bois County tax abatement program as a model. The point system, it makes sense. So I really, you've got a good product here as far as the county is concerned. I don't know how about the city's concerned, but we looked at that as how do we enact a tax abatement with us. And then the last thing is I did get text from Senator Houchin, and something came up right at the last minute. She's very sorry. She wanted to say, make sure that I conveyed that.
Yeah, I hesitate to do this, but I would just push back and respectfully, sir, the idea that we are subsidizing, you know, governments with a tax abatement. I guess I just have a slightly different perspective that I wanted to just, I guess, say out loud, really, is I don't think we're, you know, that is the company's money, and Senator Messmer alluded to that they are creating. So nothing is abated that the company is not kind of on the hook for creating. So, you know, I feel like it, you know, if anything, it's flipped around. You know, private individuals, companies are subsidizing the government. It's the government is not creating the wealth. I think that we can do a good job, or we can seek to a good job of trying to manage those things. And certainly we want to be fair to all parties. And I think it's incumbent upon local government, whether that be the city or the counties, that if, as you say, if there's a company that said they're going to create so many jobs and they don't, I'm with you. They didn't say what they're going to do. It's, you know, it's the city's responsibility or the county's responsibility. When I was on county council here in Du Bois County, and we had to do that. You know, we offered an abatement to a company. They didn't, you know, hold up their end of the bargain, and we pulled their abatement. So if that's not happening, you know, I think that is something we can go to our county councils or city councils and say, hey, you know, this is the deal. We can hold them accountable. So, but I think that, you know, the idea that, you know, that we're subsidizing companies, I would gently push back on that. And I would be happy to talk to you more about it afterwards. So I appreciate the question.
you want to say anything in closing?
Well, we have a March 14th, we'll be wrapping up. It's been a good, positive session. I think every year we try to look at, the most, pressing issues in front of us, and I think we've done a pretty good job of dealing with quite a few of those this year. I always appreciate hearing from you all, not only during session, but throughout the year. We bring a lot of improvement to what we do in the General Assembly by hearing from people at home. And when stuff's not working right, we're glad to file bills to try to make things better. So appreciate you coming out this morning.
All right, let's thank our legislators this morning for being here. Okay, we're dismissed and everyone can enjoy their day.